Hello, welcome to Comic Tropes. I'm your host, Chris. Well, it's March. The fact is, it's Women's History Month. And that got me thinking how comics is an old boys club, to a large extent. Now, that is not to say that there are not some ridiculously talented female writers and artists, all sorts of creators, editors in the comic book field, because there absolutely are. But generally, they're in the minority, and they might have to work harder to be heard and seen. So can you imagine what it must have been like back in the golden age of comics? There were definitely some women that worked as editors and artists, but they were anomalies back then. I want to talk about a particular artist from the golden age of comics. She worked in the mid-40s to the end of the 40s. She was incredibly talented, but her real-life story might be even more exciting than the characters she illustrated, because this is a riches to rags story. This is the story of surviving the Holocaust. This is the story of a woman who became very successful in a male-dominated industry. This is the story of Lily Renee. Born in Austria in 1925, Lily Renee Wilhelm grew up an only child in a privileged home, learning about the arts. But in 1939, with World War II a real threat for Lily and her Jewish family, her parents put her on the Kindertransport, which was shuttling children out of mainland Europe as refugees to England. At only 14 years old, she was on her own with nothing to her name except for a valuable camera and a coat. Her parents' attempt to salvage some of their wealth. For 2 years, Lily worked as a servant and a nanny, living in a rat-infested dorm and not knowing if her parents were even still alive. Then, at age 16, she received a letter and money from her parents, who had successfully immigrated to America. But Lily was unable to take advantage of this. Just a week earlier, someone had accused her of being a spy because it was suspicious for a young teenage refugee to always have that nice camera with her. Lily was placed on a list of people not allowed to leave the country. She began sneaking down to a safe house at the nearest port, but was arrested by the police. At the police station, a stranger negotiated her release, and she escaped onto a ship to New York, where she successfully reunited with her parents. The three lived in a small apartment with other refugees, foreigners in a country that was just emerging from the Great Depression. Lily took on whatever after-school jobs she could find to help her family make ends meet, including modeling and using her art skills to illustrate catalog pages for Woolworths. In 1943, her mother pointed out a job ad by Fiction House to illustrate comics. Fiction House had struggled like many publishers in the Great Depression, but became profitable when their character Sheena, Queen of the Jungle, hit big. It led them to revamp their entire line of comics to feature pin-up girl heroes. But with America now entering World War II, many jobs saw their workforce evaporate. Lily applied, and the job paid $18 a week. Far too good to pass up on, even though she claimed to know nothing about comics. But Lily's innate art skills led to her having steady work at Fiction House, working on characters like Jane Martin, an aviator hero, and the Werewolf Hunter. When she was credited, it was simply as L. Renee, and she would receive fan mail addressing Mr. Renee. But the character she became most associated with was Senorita Rio. Senorita Rio...
Hello, Chris. It's me, Infotron. I'm back. Do you require any assistance talking about comic book history? My databanks are full of information.
No, I was doing fine this time without you, Infotron. You can go back to the basement and cuddle with the water heater. Back to Lily. Senorita Rio was an American actress named Rita Farr, whose fiancé, Bill, is killed during the attack on Pearl Harbor. Rita signs up to become a spy and a Nazi hunter. Thanks to her Hispanic heritage, she's placed in South America on missions chasing Nazis. Lily's artistic talents suited Senorita Rio. She drew beautiful people, elaborate dresses and costumes, and her knowledge of German expressionists like Klimt and Dix meant she was fantastic with evocative shadows, perfect for late-night jungle scenes of intrigue. By 1949, Lily had gotten married, she soon had 2 children, she left Fiction House, she left comics altogether. She basically disappeared overnight. But let's jump back in time to Fight Comics number 49, take a look at some of her work, some of her styles, techniques, tropes, and see if her work is as exciting as her real life. The first page of this Senorita Rio story is essentially a splash page hinting at the story to come. There's a few things worth noting. We can see the initials LR, and that denotes Lily Renee's credit. We can see that she has delicate line art and elaborate dresses. That's a hallmark of her work. The story begins with Agent Rio getting a note that says, "The clipped message had been urgent. Snap over to HQ, toots. Something big." It's a very progressive comic in a lot of ways. A female protagonist, even one with Hispanic heritage, and it's being illustrated by a female artist. Very rare for its time. They still call her Toots in an official message from her bosses. "Hey, Toots, get to work." Rio reports to an embassy, and we see a small figure thinking, "There she goes, I'll wait here in the shadows." But there really aren't that many shadows. I mean, we can see that the figure is illustrated in shadows, but there's no indication from the colorist that it's nighttime. Everything is in really bright colors, so that doesn't match up too well. The story begins with Rio reporting to her superior, who asks her to look into someone called Hugo Flame, who is rumored to be gathering forces for a revolution at his lab deep in the Amazon. Rio is tailed back to her hotel, and some men sneak in. Take a look at Lily's natural storyteller instincts. The panel-to-panel work is quite clear, and the angles she chooses heighten the drama. We have a shot of an enemy spy inside their car looking at Rio, giving us a voyeuristic feel. We also have the clever shot of Rio's mirror showing someone sneaking in behind her. And of course we have the cheesecake panel of Rio getting ready for bed, breaking through the panel. It's given the most real estate on the page, and that's clearly what a lot of the readers are here for. The 2 thugs chloroform Rio and read her orders to investigate their boss, Hugo Flame. They leave the papers behind so that Rio isn't sure that they read them. And then she meets Maria Madras, who we just saw tailing her last page, so we, the audience, know that she works for Flame as well. But Maria presents herself as a local journalist looking for Flame and asks to accompany Rio. The storytelling back here was much more condensed than what we read today, so we sort of just have to assume Rio has set up a cover of being a journalist and is going out looking for Flame. We're never really told that, but you just have to go, oh, okay, I guess that was established and that Maria knows that. That was just sort of a product of its time with like that super condensed storytelling. But that being said, all that plot on that page, don't worry, we still have plenty of real estate for, a pinup shot of Rio. So, your boners are safe. Rio and Maria board a boat to head into the jungle, and we have a quick cutaway to Hugo Flame, who is conducting some type of experiments with feeding enslaved locals some radioactive food. If this was a Marvel comic, those guys would all instantly get superpowers and beat the crap out of Hugo. But this is real life, so I don't know what the radioactivity is doing. Maybe poisoning them? A large man on Rio's boat runs toward her and begins to warn her about Flame, so Maria shoots him and pretends she thought she was defending Rio. In the jungle, Flame's men warn that Rio is coming, but only has suspicions, no evidence. Flame brags that, beyond being a genius, he can also act. Rio and Maria's cart is attacked by some natives who we see are actually trying to warn her about Flame, but Flame's enslaved men kill the other natives and offer to escort the ladies. It's worth pointing out that again, Lily's artistic instincts are right on the money, giving the cart tipping over the most space and even breaking the panel borders. The oxen is especially well rendered. The way the natives are rendered is not that flattering. A product of the times, sort of unfortunate, but even more unfortunate, we haven't really seen a sexy shot of Rio in a while, so everybody's boners are starting to be in danger. Flame greets the women, but Rio's internal monologue tells us that she's suspicious. That night, she sneaks out and knocks out a guard. She sees the prisoners and says that they're glowing due to radioactivity. Let me make this clear because the colorist and letterer do no favors in this panel. The colorist has not drawn these men glowing, first of all, so that contradicts what we're reading. And then if you actually read what Rio is saying, she doesn't say radioactive, she says radio space active. So that's the letter not really helping. From this, if we're taking it completely literal, we might think Rio thinks that these enslaved prisoners are using radios too much. But if we use context, if we think this through, we know that she's worried that they're becoming radioactive somehow. Flame appears and grabs Rio, ties her up in his lab, and he's joined by Maria as well as the guard who Rio knocked out earlier. But we also know from reading her thought balloons that she had rescued this guard on a previous mission. The guard unties her, and Rio instantly shoves Maria into a pit full of uranium where she'll die. We know this because Maria says, "Help, that she-devil pushed me into the uranium pit. I'll die. No, no." I think this is a trope that can sometimes still be found today, and that is a character doing one action in a panel, but still having plenty of time to have a lot of text, like just a lot of dialogue. I mean, how many times have we seen, say, an X-Men comic where they're training, and, somebody has the time to say, "Oh, you, and you, you're all using your powers in this way, that way, and this way. Oh, it's me, Cyclops, and old Butterfingers here. Looks like he dropped the ray gun, but Beast, with your athletic prowess, it looks like you're picking it up and throwing to the high-flying Angel. And meanwhile, Marvel Girl, you're turning off the computers with your mental projections." Something like that, and it's just like one simple illustration of somebody like tossing something. That's something we definitely still see in comics. Rio runs over to the cage and frees the natives, who promptly kill Flame off panel. Rio reports back that the mission is complete and that Flame had some big evil plan all along. And that's the story. I think that Lily Renee was honestly a great artist for her time. I think that mid-40s, that's some excellent artwork and some excellent storytelling. Seriously, top tier for its time. I think it still holds up pretty well. I mean, we're dealing with a really condensed narrative that's pushed into only 9 pages, which I think, these days, could be easily a full 22-page comic, if not 2 issues, really exploring the side characters and setting the mood and the tone, letting the action have more room to breathe. But yeah, Lily Renee, what an amazing person, right? She survived World War II. She lived on her own as a teenager after growing up rich and privileged. It's really amazing. And then she used her natural talents to become very successful in a career that women really weren't successful or didn't have open to them most of the time. Back in the early golden age of comics. So I think it's just a really amazing story, an interesting creator. I hope you found it interesting too. And next week, well, we'll have something maybe a little more fun, I think. And until then, you know what? Why don't you keep reading comics? Yeah, keep reading comics.